Good morning, and welcome to this early morning edition of the Stylo News Intel update. It is August 17th, 2026, and this is your objective, fact-driven Asia situation report. Our goal today is straightforward: to provide you with a calm, highly structured analysis of the key flashpoints across the Asian theater, drawn entirely from open-source intelligence. We're going to examine the data, track the patterns, and objectively look at the perspectives of regional decision-makers to help you understand the geopolitical landscape as it stands right now. Before we dive into the data, a quick word about our sponsor, ProWave AI. They're the developers of Stylo News, which is the advanced AI-powered open-source intelligence platform that actually drives the analysis we're sharing today. They're also the team behind Stylo News, the commercial platform that delivers AI-powered news on demand across web and mobile apps. Their continuous monitoring makes this morning's briefing possible. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be moving systematically through 6 intelligence sectors: East Asia, the Korean Peninsula, South Asia border tensions, internal stability in Southeast Asia, the information environment, and finally, our strategic outlook. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the East Asia Situation Report, focusing specifically on Taiwan and the South China Sea. To make sense of the noise, our analysis is driven by 3 core questions, what we call priority intelligence requirements. First, is there evidence that China is about to attack Taiwan? Second, will China achieve uncontested control over the South China Sea? And third, what is the current threat level to United States forces operating in the region? Let's look at where the friction is actually happening. During Taiwan's recent Hong Kong defense exercises, reporting confirmed multiple aircraft sorties and naval deployments by the People's Liberation Army. This included 2 distinct crossings of the median line right into Taiwan's air defense identification zone, which is a clear test of territorial boundaries. At the same time, further south near Scarborough Shoal, we're tracking sustained Chinese drills and legal enforcement actions. These were strategically timed right after the Philippines submitted their recent maritime chart to the United Nations. So, comparing the data over the past 72 hours, an immediate, large-scale amphibious invasion of Taiwan remains of very low probability. We just aren't seeing the necessary precursors for that kind of action. There's no mass amphibious loading, no massive logistics staging, and no broad reserve call-ups. Instead, what is highly probable and currently ongoing is what we call gray zone coercion. The PLA clearly prefers calibrated escalation. We're talking about blockade rehearsals, cyber disruptions, and steady maritime pressure. It's all designed to test resolve without crossing the threshold into open warfare. Addressing that third intelligence requirement regarding U.S. forces, the threat right now is latent, but it's elevated. Independent open-source summaries highlight a perceived strategic window right now, which is largely created by U.S. asset diversion and munitions strain linked to conflicts in other global theaters. If a rapid crisis were to escalate here, the highest-risk targets for long-range strikes or cyber disruption would include Kadena, Yokosuka, and Andersen Air Force Base. Embassies are safe at this hour, but the very short warning times in this theater mean continuous monitoring is absolutely crucial. Moving to Section 2, the Korean Peninsula Threat Assessment, where we are monitoring escalation indicators. The central question here is incredibly straightforward. Are there actual indicators that North Korea is preparing to launch a deliberate, large-scale attack on South Korea? We have to separate genuine war preparations from routine political posturing. And this brilliantly illustrates what we're looking at. Over on the East Coast, at the city of Wonsan, the strongest kinetic activity we've seen recently was a North Korean ballistic missile launch directed toward the East Sea. But just as importantly, we are closely watching the Kaesong DMZ approach corridor. Notably, we have seen 0 unusual forward artillery dispersal or mass troop movements there that would point to imminent hostilities. Based on those facts, assessing Pyongyang's intent is quite clear. General war preparation is highly unlikely in the immediate term. The hostile rhetoric we're hearing, mostly tied to U.S. and South Korean military drills, fits a very well-established long-term pattern of deterrence messaging and calibrated coercion. Beyond that, regional reporting is heavily focused on North Korea's opportunistic proxy support to Russia. This shows how interconnected these global theaters are, pointing much more toward broad geopolitical posturing rather than preparations for a localized, all-out offensive. Next is Section 3, South Asia border tensions. We're analyzing interstate friction in the subcontinent. The core intelligence requirement we're tackling here is assessing the threat of conventional war among the heavily militarized, nuclear-armed states in this region, specifically India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and China. When we look at the India-Pakistan border, we are definitely seeing localized areas of heightened tension. Recent reports confirm unrest in Pakistan-administered Kashmir. We also have a documented incident where India's border security force shot a suspected intruder near the Amritsar sector. On top of that, we're tracking genuine civilian and security concerns over terror sightings in the Doda Kathua, Kulgam, and Poonch sectors. Even with those incidents, the key indicators do not point to imminent conventional war. Yes, India remains on high alert along the line of control, but there are no verified reports of major conventional mobilization, sustained artillery exchanges, or coordinated air activity. We are also monitoring strategic shifts, like the discussions surrounding the Saudi-Turkey-Pakistan Mecca Pact. So while the threat environment is certainly elevated due to proxy incidents and border friction, it sits firmly below the threshold of major state-on-state conflict. Shifting gears to Section 4, Southeast Asia Internal Stability. Here, the nature of the threat landscape changes quite a bit. The question here is, what are the primary threats to national stability in this specific region? The intelligence overwhelmingly shows us that the most acute dangers are coming from internal fragmentation, insurgencies, and civil conflict, not necessarily nation-on-nation warfare. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the absolute center of gravity for regional instability is Myanmar, specifically the Sagaing region in the northwest. We are, of course, keeping a close eye on the maritime zones for interstate friction, but the physical battle space inside Myanmar is a severe and ongoing crisis that demands attention. Independent sources confirm a truly dire situation on the ground. The ruling junta is actively blocking flood aid to resistance-held villages in Sagaing, all while carrying out sustained airstrikes. This dual tactic of kinetic pressure and humanitarian denial is rapidly degrading the country's internal stability. And this prolonged crisis is doing something else. It's fracturing the diplomatic consensus of neighboring ASEAN nations, making any coordinated security response extremely complicated. We're also noting secondary threats, like militant activity in Mindanao and southern Thailand, which are actively straining domestic security forces in those areas. This brings us to Section 5, the Information Environment, examining sentiment and OSINT targets. To keep our analysis completely impartial and balanced, Stylo Intel Ops systematically monitors a huge diverse array of open-source targets. We pull from key regional outlets like the South China Morning Post, Nikkei Asia, and the Irrawaddy. We also track sentiment by watching high-volume social media hashtags, things like #HongKong, #Asian, and #Myanmar. By cutting through the digital noise and analyzing these streams, we can detect early warning indicators of social fragmentation, gauge public anxiety, and identify the different narratives that regional decision-makers are using to justify their actions. Finally, Section 6, our strategic outlook. Having reviewed all the data, let's look at the most likely events in the near term. So the crucial point is this. What should you be watching for? Expect a continuation of the patterns we've outlined today. Look for sustained, incremental PLA gray zone operations in the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea, rather than any sudden invasion. Anticipate more North Korean missile demonstrations timed perfectly to regional military exercises. Be aware of elevated but highly localized tension along the India-Pakistan line of control, and foresee a deepening internal crisis within Myanmar. Which leaves us with a rather provocative question to consider. Will this relentless drumbeat of incremental pressure and internal fracturing fundamentally rewrite the security architecture of Asia long before a formal declaration of conflict ever occurs? That concludes our morning intelligence summary. Thank you for joining us for this situation report. For a deeper dive into these events, we encourage you to listen to the full on-demand Stylo News Intel update audio briefing on your favorite channel, or just follow the link in this post. And to make sure you receive continuous AI-powered news and intelligence briefings, subscribe today at www.stylonews.com. Good day.